Ultimately, all I was saying was I wanted to talk about UST and Luna, primarily Luna. The Luna situation, apparently people are trying to burn their tokens now. So they're trying to move that forward a little bit on their own as a community. And Do Kwon gave the burn wallet. So they're trying to see if they can salvage it before the 27th. Of course, you got nearly 7 trillion in supply, which for the same reasons as SHIB is unlikely to happen. I don't know where we go from here other than the 27th still looks like the plan to go forward with the fork, and then they're going to do the airdrop of tokens. If it turns out that they're able to burn enough in time, then we'll have to wait and see if that's going to be a thing. But right now, from what I see, I don't see any way that that burn's going to make a dent in that supply. Also, people think that the minting's still on. Do Kwon, Do Rug Pull swears it's not, but the supply keeps changing, and so people aren't really sure what the heck's going on. I can't say because again, I'm not watching it that intently. All I'll say is it feels like there's something weird going on in the land of Terra and Luna with this last crunch of 5 days. To me, it's going to fork and things will happen, and he has to kind of take it on the chin. If people want to burn their tokens, they're kind of ripping themselves off because they're not going to get the airdrop. That might make them whole. On the flip side, if there's enough, like in this case, you'd have to have every single whale basically burn, say, half their inventory. And then in theory, you could, because a lot of people hold the Luna tokens. So it's not going to make a dent unless you can get into people's wallets, because the Terra can't burn what they don't own. And right now, most of the supply is circulating. So you'd have to have people, I'm talking whales. You're not having whales do it. The one-off people ain't going to do it. The retail isn't going to do it. You'd have to have, I know MEXC said, but a MEXC is a small bit player. You'd have to have like the Binances of the world and all these major ones, the validators. We already saw the validators just saying, just fork it deep, deep. So to me, I understand what they're trying to do. I'm saying I'm not sold that they're going to be able to pull it off. I could be wrong, and hopefully I am wrong. Maybe I am wrong. I'm saying to me, it feels like it's not going to be a thing. So anyway, let me go ahead and get into my topic here, the primary topic, because people seem to have a hard time understanding with buys and sells. And I'm circling this around LockPay because it's where it came up the most, but it affects Luna too. Buys and sells are important in a project, and the reason is that you have to understand the flow in transactions. If I pull this guy up over here, it's just the dam, right? My thumbnail. If you understand the purpose of a dam, the dam does multiple things. It catches water, and it prevents water from flowing downstream, which prevents flooding, right? And then it's got mechanisms to kind of control that flow. It might support rivers, but it's also a reservoir for people to get drinking water, for people to swim, people to row and transact, right? So the dam concept is what you basically have in regular exchange, transactional. You have a supply of something and you control the stream of it. So you make it available to other people to use it and do whatever they're going to do with it, but you also need to hold some of it. If you think of liquidity pools in crypto, that's basically what you're dealing with. You have your core token paired with some other token, and the balance of the two, the ratio of the two is what makes things work. If you don't have the core token, whichever your token is, they can't buy from you. If you don't have this other token, they can't a place to put that token, they can't pay you. And when they want to sell back, you don't have money to give them. This is 101, right? If I go to a store and I want to buy something for the store, I know this is a different era, but I want to buy a DVD from a store, it's $20 at the store. I need to be able to have the place to hold the $20. I need to be able to have the DVD to give to somebody walking in there. Could you imagine a world where a Best Buy, let's say out here in the US, they would basically just say, well, I'm only going to sell you 1/5 of a DVD because I'm trying to constrain how much I can sell. It wouldn't make any sense. The DVD is what it is. The price is what it is. That's free market. I should be able to charge whatever I feel like charging. You pay whatever I'm charging it for. If we're doing a barter, like say Craigslist or eBay or something else, the price is going to be different. I might charge you more because it's rare, sure. You might say, look, I can offer you this other thing over here in trade for it, and there's value for me. And this is all free market enterprise. This is how this is how things flow. This is how transactions work. Here's where it breaks down. When you create arbitrary limitations in the availability of supply or the availability of, the way transactions work, you end up with significant on one direction or the other. I'm going to pull up an old example of an old project called Green Chart. Green chart, there is a green chart out there now, but it's not the same green chart. I'm going to tell you the background story, and I want you to pay close attention to the graph I have up there on the screen because it's going to click to you, I think. Green chart in its original form built a structure that was designed to make sure it kept going up, 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 up. They wanted to prevent people from ever being able to dump off the project. As a result, it did climb pretty darn substantially until it hit the first bear period. During the bear period, hackers figured out how to cheat the algorithm, and they eventually were able to start dumping on the project. The devs couldn't figure out why. The devs, in their telescam, gave the keys to the kingdom, including the liquidity access, to some duck-faced girl who was one of their fangirls, gave it to her. She took the project and ran with all the money. They got it back, allegedly. They got it back, but the damage was done. Now the project is worthless because of all these constraints they built that somebody got around. The current green chart can't hold that persistent up. It has buys and sells, and they just applied a tax over top of it. They got rid of all the restrictions and things that the first green chart was trying to do. Again, I want you to note the graph movement here and how it's doing it, right? It's going straight up, and you don't see the sideways movement that you see with so many other ones. Now, if I contrast this with LockPay's graph, doesn't that look a little bit similar to you in terms of all that, right? Here's the issue. You can build all the mechanics that you want as the dev of a project. The thing is, every buys and sells, exchange, trade, this is all normal to have buys and sells. You want buys and sells. It's how you maintain a healthy liquidity balance. If you constantly have buy, you've heard the concept, hopefully, of consolidation. At some point, it's got to plateau. At some point, it's got to hit this. The longer it takes to get to this plateau, the worse the crash. Every single time we see this. And for those that don't believe me, I'll pull up another example of one that did the same thing at first. Internet Computer, who started and it bumped to an unreasonable level, I think hundreds of dollars per coin, if not higher. And now I don't know what it's crashed to, but it crapped out. Sustainability is critical in any sort of trade, but certainly in cryptocurrency. The idea that it can only ever go at some velocity up, it's got to hit a plateau. It's got to consolidate. The level of consolidation grows based on how high it went up, and then at some point it's going to crap and crash. If you're ready for it, as meaning you know it's going to happen, then you can make a sell decision. In the stock market, it's easy to predict these things, right? The company had new leadership. The company lost a leader. The company lost some products. The company got kicked out of a country. These are predictors, and you can use these to anticipate what's going to happen. Look at what happened with Terra. Nobody saw what was happening until it was already too late, even though the first inklings of a problem started really arguably sometime in April. It's just that we didn't see it until the first week of May. It was already too late to react because people had already lost. If you look at that chart, it went straight down and nobody could do anything about it until it was far too late. Now we're in reaction mode. What I'm saying is I like to see projects that allow people to do what they're going to do the way that they're going to do it and not try to constrain them or block them or prevent them or do anything to halt their progress forward. Just let them do what they're going to do with their own cryptocurrency, whether that's a buy, whether that's a sell. Then learn how to build your project in a way that does not support dumping, meaning that your project's so darn good, people don't want to dump out of it. There are many projects that have tried to do this, like Libero tries to do this. Libero has never had a significant dump. If you look at its graph, it's a steady decline, never a straight down as we saw with Seifu, never a straight down like with ICP, never a straight down like any other project like Terra. It's always like a steady down. Steady down's fine because we know that that's consolidation. We know that once it hits the bottom, there are going to be people who buy off that dip and it's going to shoot right back up again and start all over again. We want healthy movement up and down. If you buy into a project and they're telling you that, you know what, this is the way we're going to do it, and we want to make sure that you don't lose a significant amount of money because we're going to lock whales out, what I suspect will happen in those projects is somebody's going to figure out a way to cheat that mechanic. And there's multiple ways to do this. If they cheat the mechanic, the dev's not going to be able to react quick enough because they're assuming that their mechanic is flawless and cannot be breached. But all of them get breached, like Green Chart. They all get breached at some point, and it's a matter of time before, and most of the time they're waiting for the right peak. What's the right peak where I can start, basically draining off the project? That or it just gets straight hacked, like elephant money. Elephant money was another one. Climb, 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 climb. Then what they do, they hacked it out of the back. They hacked it out of the staking. They're going to find a way to cheat the project because they see that, okay, this is going to get to a point and I'm just going to go and attack that one, attack vector. If it's a healthy climb and down and climb and down and climb and down, they're nowhere near as enticing. Why do you think Hex doesn't get anywhere near the level of dump that some of these other projects do? Because it has a healthy climb. It's not the unhealthy like you see here or the unhealthy like you see on LotPay, where it's just literally just going straight up like this. These are going to be attack targets. So worst, it might not even be somebody selling in good faith. It could be somebody outside that's ripping off the project and taking out the back end. You just don't know. I'm saying, for me, as an opinion stated, I don't support a graph that looks like this guy. I support a graph that's healthy, ups and downs, that I see people have bought and sold, because I know that's going to sustain the liquidity. I'm more focused on volume. I want to see that the volume numbers go up, regardless of whether the volume is buy related or sell related, because volume shows me recurrent interest, strong interest in a project. If you look at something like Terra now, Terra has over 1 billion in volume. So I know it's got interest of some kind. Even though there's people selling, it's still able to maintain consistency, regardless of the fact that it dumped off the front. But it was unsustainable as built, which caused this breach. I don't think it was a breach, but that's what they say it was. That's what causes it unsustainable up front. Now that it's at rock bottom, there's still interest to kind of buy off the dip and get back up to a top. All of these projects have that same capability. You can buy at the bottom and buy up, and people will do so if you've made the project enticing enough to make it worth people's time to buy into it, even if it's otherwise a garbage project. So when I look at other projects like Seifu launched at about $10. The first time it launched, I covered it and I said, I think this is unsustainable. It's going to unreasonably pump and then it's going to crap and it's going to have a hard time rebasing to recover, because they did the same thing. They marketed it as growth. They're just going to go up, 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 and then a bunch of shill. It followed the exact pattern I said it was going to do, and it struggled to get back up to where it was. Part of that's the decrease in Bitcoin, but Seifu launched at a point where Bitcoin was already at a low price. So it can't really follow the same excuse as somebody like a Terra or somebody like ICP or somebody like AVAX or somebody like, not Phantom now, but Polygon. It doesn't have the same excuse because it launched where Bitcoin was already down. So we know that its decrease is literally people selling out. Some of them sold out, I would argue, for Luna. Some of them sold out for Libero. Some of them sold out for this Alto, likely. Some of them sold out for other projects of the same kind to try to rob Peter to pay Paul. Okay, well, if you look at Seifu's chart, I'm not going to pull that up, but if you look at Seifu's chart followed the same pattern as them all. My summary thoughts here, I suspect that many of these projects, like, you can never have a project that's just going to keep climbing. It's nearly impossible. There's never been one that keeps climbing. At some point, it will hit a plateau. We don't know where the plateau is, but we do know that the higher it had to climb, the greater the crash. We've seen it time and again. And as long as people are able to keep safe during this process, it's not a big deal. Where it's a real issue is if the project doesn't let you sell off that plateau to get out. So if you looked at something like Saitama, people were able to buy in on the way up, and they were able to get out if they knew enough that this Vegas event's going to be a disaster. They were able to dump completely out, wait for it to crap the bottom, and then potentially buy back in when it was at the lowest to keep themselves safe. Being able to buy and sell, whether all of it or some of it or whatever you choose, is part of your investment strategy. If you can't do it, that means whatever developer is controlling your portfolio. And frankly, that's unacceptable to me, at least. I don't want any developer telling me what I can and can't do. That said, if the developer implements a tax process, right? It's, if you choose to sell, go ahead, but it's 30% tax. That's different. You're making the choice. I have a medical bill come up and I need to get the money quick and I can eat the 30 because I got to do it. At least they allow you to do it. I think as long as you don't put more money than you can afford to lose, that's not as big of a deal. But the key is to make sure if you're putting a bunch in there because you really believe in it, but they don't let you take all of it out, think of what that downstream risk would be if, again, it's a medical bill or something happens to your kid or something happens to your spouse or something happens to your car or whatever, and you can't get the money out and you get blocked by the dev. Now you're put in a tough position, even though your portfolio balance is still strong, you can't access your money. Think about whether that's acceptable to you. If it is, great. I'm saying for me, that would never be acceptable. I should always be able to access my money when I need to, unless I purposely locked it because I knew it's money I can throw away, money I can live without, like Liberal Bank. I can live without it. It doesn't matter. It's $100 or some odd. Who cares? I've got other money in other places that I can easily access. Or maybe I staked it somewhere in NFTs. Sure, it's throwaway money. I don't care. Never would I put more money than I can afford to be without. And that's the lesson I have for people on Luna's side. Don't put money that you can't afford to be without. Please don't do that. It's just going to put you in a rough spot. And I see so many people saying that they're going to lose their home and this, that, and the other, all because they went YOLO into something. And I don't know why, or they took out big loans on something because they see these green candles and they figure this is the one. This is going to make me a millionaire. It's just got to drop 10 deep. And then turns out the dev programmed something where you can't become a millionaire. And then you got to wait. And then all of a sudden, due to something outside of your control, outside of their control, the coin backing it crapped. And so it craps and you lose value and you're still stuck. I apply the same principle to pre-sales. If the pre-sale doesn't allow you to get access to your funds up front and they block you and put a vesting on there, it's the same problem. If you put a pre-sale in there and you dump $1,000 in there and they say you can only access like 10% of it every month, and then it craps immediately because they did that, which harms investors, it's the same as a realized loss at that point. Last point I'll say on this business, be thinking about what tax implications you have investing in projects that do these things. If you invest in a project that's going to restrict your access to the money, so it's basically put in, like say it's a CD, right, at a bank, you have to lock it for 5 years. That money is still an asset, right, and still can be claimed by the government if they want to, but it's not a loss until it's a loss. If the project doesn't crap, it's a gain. It's going to be a capital gain on you. And when it comes time that you can withdraw, you're going to be taxed if you're doing it correctly. So be aware of that as well if you choose to do it. Whereas if it's one where you're able to take profits on the way down, you could spread out how much that tax burden is easier. Say it goes up, you put in 1,000, it goes 5x. So you're 5,000 up, you take out a couple $100 here and there. That's a less impact of tax burden than if it went up 10x and you waited till it was full 10 and then you withdrew the whole shot shebang 10,000 and then you get nailed 25% or 27% in capital gains tax. For most people, they're like, whatever, but I don't like that. I don't know. And I know this because I do my own taxes. I know that depending on what you claim, your tax obligation is going to change. So this type project where it's holding your funds has a risk of loss. We know this. If you're not able to claim all your money out at the point of loss or just before loss to mitigate the loss, it means you might be on the hook once it does hit the plateau and it does crap. You might need to account for that difference. You might need to account for, I put 1,000 in a thing. It crapped down to 10, like this Terra business. Okay, how much was that? $990 was lost, so that you can claim it to offset other losses, or possibly say, you know what, I lost 990 on this and 500 on this and this over that, and these would be deductible items. Make sure you account for that too. I'm saying if you choose to buy into anything, it's all totally up to you if you choose to. I personally wouldn't. Don't take my personal, what I would do. Take the information that guides my decision and make your own decision as to whether it makes sense for you. I'm simply saying that graphs like this should be risky on their face because, as you've seen in my yesterday episode, most graphs are that. Most graphs are sideways because you have buys and sells and there's healthy activity, there's healthy volume, and people are interested, and the volume is what really keeps the token sustained. Once the volume goes down, what happens? The graph steadily starts going down like that, and it doesn't really matter. Like even in something like this one, if the volume goes down, that green's not going to keep going up because, number one, nobody would be buying. Number one, nobody would be selling, and the value of all the tokens would be decreasing even though there's no transactions. If you were locked in it because of the way they built it, then you're going to have to calculate how much you're losing if that were to happen. The other thing to keep about on any of these projects, any of them, and this more goes to the stable coins than anything else. There was a process where somebody wanted to compensate me for something. And I said, you can compensate me. It really needs to be in stable coin. And the reason is that stable coins don't change value, or they shouldn't change value. If you do cash out of any project, be thinking about which stable coin you choose and make sure that it's a stable coin that is actually going to remain stable. Sometimes you can't know, but make sure you try to choose one that's reasonably stable. Binance USD has maintained its stability pretty darn well. USDC is purposely pegged to the US dollar and has a lot more rigor around it, so it's maintained stability. DAI has tried to maintain stable. I think it only lost one, and it was for a fraction of a second, so it's pretty darn stable. Other ones, like, I forget what the one was, but there was one, USD Tether, that was it. It lost its peg for all of a split few minutes or something with the whole UST business. USD Tether happens to be the one primary stablecoin pegged to almost everything in every exchange, yet it's the one with the greatest risk of depegging. So if you store in exchanges or you transact in exchanges, I would recommend choosing a different stablecoin that's a little bit more stable, where you don't see reports of it losing its peg. Just things to think about now that we kind of took for granted. The UST should kind of tell us, you know what, we need to rethink our stablecoin strategy. Many of the exchanges have started moving, or at least implementing, new pairs against USDC because they know it's a little bit more stable. From what I understand, USDC just is a little bit more problematic for them to implement, but it's available for people that want to do that, and it seems to be a little bit more trustworthy, or Binance USD. There's some wrapped ones that are available. I would stick with USDC personally, or Binance USD if you can. If it's Ethereum, there are other options. Suffice to say, regardless of what way you go, regardless of what way you transact, regardless of what way you look at it, I think it's a different era that you want to think through different ways to approach what you leave in what you cash out to what, and what you left stuck in what, because you got to account for these things. Because come tax time, you're going to need to be able to tell somebody, here's what was happening in the situation at the time. I invested in a project, it's stuck in there, I didn't get any realized gain. So yes, it's whatever, it's ignored. Or I was stuck in a thing and it crapped 90%, and so I have a loss, a realized loss, because it's not going to recover. Or I cashed out and I cashed out 10% of it, so this is the only amount that I should be taxed against because the rest of it's locked up. You're going to need to categorize all this stuff, in my opinion. Otherwise, what happens later, when they actually do start putting in regulations, I can guarantee you they're going to put the IRS all over the stuff. And when you have stuff like the Terra business that happened, I don't think that they're going to count those as realized losses unless you tell them it's a realized loss, and here's why: because it was outside of my control and I got no profit out of it. Okay. Or like this business, it's a realized loss because it was locked in a thing and then it crapped out. I didn't realize any profit. Or they say, no, you did realize profit. Look, you realize this profit up here, it went up a doop. That's all profit. We're going to tax you 27%, and you better fork it or pay up sucker. All of that's open in the air. Document and track. If you choose as a strategy, you can avoid these kinds of things. Just be aware that means that you're saying, I'm not going to take that risk on. I'm going to avoid that risk, not just of the loss, but also the later tax implications around that. When you research those projects, then that's your part of your consideration is, what is the tax implication of going in this business? Like the Baked Beans project is a great example. The Baked Beans project is generating other recurrent income sources. What is the tax implication of going into that project? It might look good right now that it's to the moon, let's fucking go deep, and it goes 5x, and that's cool. But what is the tax implication of me going in it now if they start locking this type of project down? If I choose to go to stable coins, do they start treating that as realized gain? Do I not do that up front? Do I leave it in exchange? The exchange is reporting to the government. Do I leave it in my wallet knowing it's hard to cash out? These are all things to think about. How you act on it's totally up to you. What you do about it's totally up to you. I'm saying these are all things to think about. And why this came to my mind is, as I was looking at projects like this one, that they're trying to build a mechanic designed to disallow selling. You can sell, but not like we know. Okay, that changes the definition of realized gain and realized loss, and it limits what people can do and what's in their control, but you don't have anything equivalent to that outside of crypto. So they have never set a precedent, they meaning the governments, around, well, how do you handle that? Is it truly a realized gain because it's pumping and you're locked from it and they can tax you against it, even though you never realized the gain? Or do they treat it as an unrealized gain, in which case you just tell them about it, but you're not charged for it? Or do they say, we don't even look at it? Or do they treat it as a loss when it craps? Chances are they won't treat it as a loss when it craps if you still have it locked in there. They would want to see that you tried to claim and then you're claiming a loss against it. That means you have to wait for it to crap and then you have to claim it out as a loss. Like we see with Terra, it was $500,000. It's now $2. I have this loss, and good because you can claim it on your taxes, but not good because you lost $498,998. Be thinking about what the impact of these things are before you jump in it. And you might still say, you know what, whatever, I'm going to go in it and deal with the taxes later. Perfectly okay. If you buy into a project and you know you're taking profit out on a regular basis, maybe you set that aside and say, this is my tax deal. Maybe you say, I'm not going to cash out anything and I'll just let it marinate so that I don't have any realized gains. Maybe you don't buy into projects that do this. That way you don't have the risk of unrealized gains. Maybe you only invest in projects like this because you suspect they're only going to go after you for realized gains. Like, you can think about, what is it that I really want to do? And how do I want to get ready for what I suspect is going to be our future, which is more regulation around cryptocurrency, unfortunately, where they're going to try to tie taxes into it necessarily, because once they put regs in, they're going to go after projects that look like they're making people a lot of money. They're not going to go as much around projects that aren't making people money. If you look at the stock market, they don't go after the low-level fruit that makes you $1 or $2. They don't care. There's actually thresholds in the form. They don't care about the ones that make you $5, $10, $20. It just rounds it and says whatever. They care about when you're starting to get into the 4 and 5 figures of profit. Well, that's what most people go after. They go after these profitable ones that where you can actually make a life-changing amount of money so that they can get their slice. Just like the lottery. Just like the lottery. We're going to get our 30% hook or crook. We're going to take that money from you. Do. I think crypto's going to be treated the same way. I think it's going to be treated as we're going to get our slice. And the ones that are more prone to making you more money, they're the ones that are going to go after those. If you're blocked from selling to recoup or blocked from selling to minimize loss, now what do you do about it? If you bought into a project that has mechanics that are designed to keep the project positive, please, 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 please do not YOLO into any of them. Make sure you're only putting what you can truly afford to lose. Don't take out loans to do this business. If it's one where you can openly buy and sell it, no problem. I'm talking about the ones that have mechanics designed to block you from selling, where you're basically trapped. Don't take out loans to do this. Don't do that, because you're just putting yourself in a bad spot. Because if you can't pay that loan back, you're going to be in a much worse position than if you just put your own money in there, let it grow a little bit, and be patient with the process. Make a couple $100, couple $1,000. Don't chase after super wealth. We're past the world of crypto making super wealthy people easy. You have to spend a lot to make a lot, just like the stock market. No problem. As long as you can sell, that's okay. And then just watch the fundamentals of the people. You see what's happened with Doe Rug Pull. He's already transparent. We see what he is. The clips came out. We see what he was thinking. He created that kill switch. He already had it ready to go. He already made an association to BitConnect. He already had that plan, that governance thing that was essentially rigged from the start because it was already built to support the whales. He already knew what was happening. He knew what was going on. He knew how it was going to go down. He just kind of placated people and played along and made it seem like you had an open vote. The truth is, it was already rigged from the beginning because they knew it was going to happen because he knew it was unsustainable. These are the ones I personally avoid. Other people can gamble it, but you have to be really good and have some insider information, hint, hint, to be able to time it to get out quick. The other thing, the exchanges will happily block you from trading when it suits them because they're profit driven. MEXC is one of the rare few that I've seen that isn't, but they'll happily block you from getting your money out too. So the same principle applies to them. Don't go to an exchange who has a track record of blocking trades. Coinbase has a track record of blocking trades. Coinbase was the reason SHIB had major issues and then they blocked people from trading. A bunch of people got ripped off in that whole business. Bitmart has a history of blocking trades. Hotbit has somewhat of a history of blocking trades. Main Binance does not. Binance US does. Identify the exchanges that are going to try to rip you off and try to avoid those and go towards exchanges, again, where you're able to sell. The whole point is freedom to do things. The whole point is freedom to control your situation best you can. That means stay away from any token that doesn't let you, that blocks you or stops you or somehow prohibits you from doing things. any exchanges that block you or prohibit you or restrict you from doing things. You shouldn't be restricted from doing what you want to do with your money. It's your money, period. If there's any restriction, my recommendation is avoid these at all costs, because if you get in them, and it's your right to, but if you get in them and something happens and you get in a tough spot, some large medical bill or something with your kid or something with your spouse or whatever, and that happened to be the only source of money that you can get access to, and you can't get access to it, you're going to be in a much worse spot, in my opinion, than you would have been by just putting a little bit of money in the thing, just to kind of watch the waves and make a couple hundred and move on to the next project. So, summary, big summary. We have a lot of projects doing this, or trying to do this, trying to force green candles. All of the projects that have tried to force green candles in the past have failed. Every last one of them. Because cells are important. They're important to free market. They're important to free enterprise. They're important to a healthy economy. If you don't have the ability to sell, people get turned off by this. And if you can't sell, what ends up happening? It means that your supply is going to get out of whack, and you can rebase all you care to, but as we learned with Seifu, all the rebase in the world's not going to save you if it's flat out unsustainable. You got to have a healthy balance of buys and sells. And if you don't, you got to have a plan B on what you do about it. Once that plateau hits, ideally, people would sell because they see it's a plateau, they see it craps, they wait for it to bottom, and then they buy off the dip, and then they wait for it to go back up and repeat the process. And that's healthy, natural behaviors. If there's concern about whales potentially damaging the project, I would manage the whales. Managing the whales is apply taxes, right? You say, go ahead and sell whatever you want. I'm going to take 30% from you, and I'm going to give it to everybody else because they're holding. They're not selling. We don't want you to sell, but we understand that you may need to sell, or you want to sell, or whatever. We are going to take some tax from you and distribute it to everybody else. Some people don't like the tax, especially if it's like over 15%. All the screeners hate the tax. I got you. But the beauty of the tax is that you can then incentivize holders. If we're talking proof of stake, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Because in a proof of work, you're incentivizing the miners by the volume in the traffic. In a proof of stake, you're incentivizing the stakers because they're staking. The way you get the cash for doing that is, or the liquidity versus to do that, is you apply taxes against people as an incentive to sell. I don't support taxes against buys, because if you do a tax against buy, it's a disincentive. I know that that's the way we do it in the fiat world, but we would never charge the high levels of percentage that we do in the crypto world. You would never buy again, using my DVD analogy, for $20, you would never buy a DVD if you knew you had to pay an extra $10 for the damn thing. You would never do it. It's stupid. You might be willing to pay an extra $1 or $2 or $3 because you know that the process has to support that. Sure. But how awesome is it that you don't have to pay a buy tax? You would just pay a tax to sell out, and it gets redistributed, and we redistribute the wealth. In the United States, society does want to see that people who have excessive wealth are excessively taxed greater than people that don't. For whatever reason, in crypto, we don't want to do that, and that's bizarre, because that's where you really should do it. Because most of the Citadels and the BlackRocks of the world, and people sitting on billions and billions of dollars, they're not going to blink twice at a 30% tax. They're not going to blink twice at excessive taxation, and they don't care. They care about the token and their ability to generate profit. Great. Let them buy in all they care. Let them sell all they care, but nail them to the wall when it comes time to sell and distribute it to everybody else who's holding, so that you can elevate everybody and you can enrich everybody. That's my thought. When we get to multiple wallets, then yes, those multiple wallets get enriched. Who cares? Because everybody else is still getting enriched anyway. For them to get the money, they pay everybody else. That's my stance. I'd like to see projects like this implement something similar. No blocks, no restrictions, no prohibitions. You simply tax where you want to as a disincentive to sell, but you still let them sell, and you enrich everybody else. And you do it in a way that still helps the chart go up by doing buy. You buy the tokens and then you redistribute them. Or you buy and liquidify, or you purchase them. It's a purchase transaction, so you still get the same outcome. But you're not stopping people from doing whatever they want to do with their money. Because again, the investors are the token's boss, not the other way around. That's how I feel about it. Last point, real quick. I am going to, because I have to, I am going to shift around the schedule for live recordings. I have to figure out the right time. It won't be 5 o'clock. It'll be either somewhat later, probably, most likely. I'd figure out what that time is, but just so you know, the time for the live is going to shift around because I have to work with the Endeavor, but also have to work with other updates for the Triad members so that I can balance everything out. I will make sure that there's a schedule built on YouTube. The problem is that when I build the schedule on YouTube, sometimes it doesn't queue it up correctly. So if you're interested in the lives, make sure you watch on Twitter at CTR Crypto Radio, because I'll always send out a message letting you know the exact time that we are going to go live going forward. And if I have to shift it, I'll let you know that in advance. That's the best place to get the time. If you come to the link I share, it should tell you the right time, but sometimes it just doesn't do it. Like today, I was having some weird issues. And I apologize for that. And I apologize for technical difficulties, and we work to fix them. YouTube is annoying in that regard. That's all I got. Hopefully it's been educational, informational, helpful, and beneficial to someone out there. Again, and I stress it, and I did at the end to make sure people listen to the totality of my audio. You are free to invest in whatever you want to. You are free to sell whatever you want to. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's your money. Do what you want to do with it, with your money, and don't let anybody else dictate what you should or shouldn't do. I simply provide recommendations and somewhat insight of what I see coming down the pipe, especially because of what happened with Terra, in an attempt to try to keep people safe and keep information flowing, keep the process flowing, keep the things healthy. Because I do think that we're still coming up on a slight bull run in June. It feels like it. Anyway, I could be wrong, but if I'm right, that means more FOMO off green candles. I wouldn't want somebody to FOMO in something and YOLO into it, and then like with this, they get locked in, didn't know it, right? And then they get trapped, and then a medical bill shows up, and now they're stuck, and then we're right back to the regulate crypto deep conversation. Thank you, everybody, for listening live. I, again, will be back tomorrow, likely at a later time. I will announce it on Twitter at CTR Crypto Radio. Be sure to follow us there. For more information updates, tomorrow's update, by the way, is going to cover a specific cryptocurrency. So that's going to be more on the coverage side, and I'm going to be going in depth about this particular cryptocurrency. So I will see you all then.